In our first segment tonight, we turn to the Western Hemisphere, where President Trump has intensified pressure on Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro. A growing U.S. military presence in the Caribbean carrier groups, amphibious ships, and a marine expeditionary unit has signaled that Washington is no longer relying solely on sanctions or diplomacy. At home, Maduro is responding with defiance, telling tens of thousands of supporters, "We do not want a slaves' peace." Meanwhile, analysts warned that maritime incidents involving alleged smuggling vessels could trigger something far more dangerous. Tonight we examine the stakes, and we're joined by Mr. Peter Roth, the contributing editor at Newsweek, speaking with us from Washington. Mr. Roth, welcome to In Focus. Let's begin with the fundamentals. What explains the sudden intensification of U.S. military posture around Venezuela?
Well, thank you, and it's good to be with you. The Trump administration was elected to do something about the problems created on the U.S. border with Mexico. It was very clear. They've largely stopped the open border situation that existed under Biden. But the problem wasn't just people coming in from Mexico. It was cartels coming into the United States, trafficking human beings, bringing drugs like cocaine and fentanyl. The Venezuelans have been an active part of the drug transmission. At least that's what the Trump administration believes. They have branded Maduro not only an illegitimate leader, accusing him of having stolen the last election from the opposition, a sentiment that is shared by a number of other international countries or international observers who watch the election, but that he is also, in fact, the de facto, if not actual, leader of a major Venezuelan drug cartel. And the U.S. military has taken action against ships that it says are carrying illegal drugs and counterfeits into U.S. territorial waters to land them here. And as a consequence, they move them to airplanes. And so the president has announced that the airspace is closed, which I suppose gives him some level of authority under U.S. law to shoot down planes that are suspected of being in the business of transporting cocaine, fentanyl, other illicit products into the United States from Venezuela.
Mm-hmm. Well, Washington does insist that this is an anti-drug campaign. However, many political observers and analysts are saying that maybe that narrative is not so credible. Maybe it is a cover for political coercion. What do you think?
I think it can be both. I have, and again, because I'm careful to do this, my personal opinion, this is not reportage, this is my personal opinion, is that I'm not sure at all that we have the right to blow these ships out of the water and kill the people that are on them in the name of interdicting the flow of drugs into the United States. That is a criminal activity. It is not a state-on-state activity. It is not a terrorist activity, although the Trump administration seems to believe that simply by putting that label on it, you can do whatever you want. I have real concerns about respect for due process. That these people ought to be arrested and tried, and not just murdered, not just taken out, even if they're in the midst of doing horrible things. Due process exists to protect the innocent, not the guilty. And when you start to let the slippery slope slide on your treatment of the guilty, eventually you get into places where innocent people are put in jeopardy. Mm-hmm. And we're supposed to be more concerned about protecting innocence than we are about punishing guilt. That's the American system.
Well, we've seen the strikes on the suspected smuggling vessels and the follow-up attacks, and Washington does claim they are lawful. But how are these actions then being interpreted in the region?
In Central America, I
Mm-hmm.
think that and South America, I suspect that some governments that are friendly to U.S. interests, like the new government in Bolivia, the government in Argentina, the government in some of the Central American countries, are probably supportive, as oddly enough, I think the Mexicans may be supportive as well. Number one, it takes heat off Mexico in terms of the pressure coming from the United States. But number two, the Venezuelans have been funding and pushing the convoys up through Central America into Mexico, into the southern and southwestern United States. And if they're busy defending their drug shipments, they're not as likely to be busy pushing people through Mexico into the United States. So that would work. I think there are probably some other countries where anti-U.S. sentiment runs high. Cuba runs to mind, where this is seen as an act of war, and another typical example of U.S. bullying of Central and South American countries with an eye to exploiting their mineral resources.
Mm-hmm. Well, President Trump also confirmed direct communication with Maduro. What does this reveal about the administration's strategy? Pressure, negotiation, or both?
Everything with Donald Trump is a negotiation. Pressure is applied to incentivize the desire on the part of another world leader to negotiate. You saw that in Gaza. You saw that in Iran. You see that in Russia over Ukraine. You're seeing it here. I suspect the phone calls center on how much is it going to cost us for you to leave and go to Havana or go to Moscow or go to Monte Carlo or go to someplace where they can't extradite you back to Venezuela, and you turn control of the government over to an interim leader while we hold free elections.
Mm-hmm. Well, Caracas does accuse the U.S. of using the counter-narcotics narrative as a pretext for regime change. Is this framing resonating then internationally?
I don't know that its framing resonates internationally. I can speak more about how it resonates here in the United States and among the people that dislike Trump. It resonates strongly. It's another example of Trump being reckless, of Trump potentially drawing the United States into a prolonged military conflict, although I don't really think a war between the United States and Venezuela lasts very long, if it happens, and I don't think it happens. Among Trump voters, tremendous plus, aggressive foreign policy, national security deployments to protect America first. Remember that the swing states that put Trump back into the White House in 2024 are, I think, more adversely affected by problems like fentanyl. And I'm thinking particularly of Ohio, the home state of Vice President J.D. Vance, than a lot of other states. And it is that kind of frustration, that kind of neglect, the economic hollowing out of company towns throughout the old Rust Belt, where drugs have come in and are both a profit center for the people who continue to live there and a way to escape the oblivion of their lives. That cutting off the fentanyl, cutting off the other drugs is seen as an effort to rescue those communities. So it's no surprise that Trump's approval rating among Republicans is close to 90%.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mr. Roth, reporters highlight the danger of an escalatory maritime incident. How realistic is the risk of a U.S.-Venezuela military clash? Do you think it would lead to an outright confrontation?
I think the only danger exists if another nation that is more powerful than Venezuela, that has a larger navy than Venezuela, would choose to come alongside Venezuela as an ally if there were an incident.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you are at the level where it's Venezuela and Russia or Venezuela and China, then potentially you have a real crisis on your hands that might cause President Trump to back down. Absent that, as I said, and I could be wrong because there weren't a lot of people who predicted that North Vietnam was going to beat the United States in the war in Indochina.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think a U.S.-Venezuela crisis, military crisis, shooting war lasts very long. It'd be kind of like the Falklands and would probably lead to the downfall of the Maduro regime, much as the war in the Falklands led to the end of the junta in Argentina.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Peter Rov, the contributing editor at Newsweek, thank you very much for joining us from Washington.